we had put them out, that we were somewhat concerned that we would have potentially...
But that's not what you're saying happened. It says that PIMCO had sought NAMA's acquiescence to this.
It wouldn't accede to the payments, so it wouldn't. In other words, PIMCO said, PIMCO came and said, we have these arrangements, will you acquiesce to them? And NAMA said no. We wouldn't accede to it. And as a consequence...
But would you not find that astonishing that PIMCO would essentially break the law? That if that's the case, then they were, and like this is, I'm not trying to stray here, but I mean, but that's their assertion. Because if they were to acquiesce to it, potentially, we can say that potentially they could have been signing themselves up to breaking the law. What I'm saying to you is that that doesn't seem to stack up with the notes and documentation that was given to the CNAG.
There's another minute. I think it is important that we said what was the decision of NAMA was that we were not going to allow this sale to occur under circumstances where we'd become aware of. In actual fact, there's a later minute, Chairman, where we allude to the fact, where it was questioned at the board, was Cerberus, and I remember, because I had questioned, was Cerberus a proxy? And it was said there was no evidence, because it was a concern of mine.
And why then, Mr. McHenry, did Mr. Hanna then say that things could be shaped differently for the arrangement fee to come out?
Well, I can tell you,
if it was so
robust
in terms of the
discussion
board's
decision. is the 11th and the 12th. This is the board minute of the 13th. The board position was that there would be no acquiescence.
But your PIMCO had basically signalled at that point they were gone. I mean, that was like trying to close the stable door when the horse was gone.
The position was quite clear. Going back to PIMCO, the board's position was that, okay, you can have the opportunity to withdraw, which isn't a new practice. I mean, I was in the personnel business for years, and there were occasions where people would be offered the opportunity to leave rather than you take a different course of action. But I mean, here we were offered the opportunity to leave, but it was in the clear understanding that there was no way that they could continue in the process. No way.
In concluding on this, by saying we as a committee will consider this when we're drafting our report. We've covered it a bit. We will come back to this as a committee. Deputy Connolly.
Thanks very much. You're very welcome. And just let me say I'm married to a Brian McHenry.
So I saw that subsequently.
He was never a director of elections for any Fine Gael candidate. At this point, I think I'm still married to him. But
I only saw that last week, Deputy. I was quite bemused by it.
Yeah. No, just haven't got the niceties out of the way. Let's look at this 10-page document that you've produced. I think at this point, between all of the press releases in the paper and the documents to us, you're not quite up to the page 158 of the Controller and Auditor General, but you almost are, actually. And it's an extraordinary situation because the Controller and Auditor General has made no allegations. And I agree with Deputy Cullinan. This is an extraordinary opening statement, Mr. Soff, I have to say. And I'm going to confine myself to questions in a minute, but I couldn't let it go. The language in this is pejorative, it's defensive, and it really doesn't deal with the issues. Really talking about apples and oranges and talking about any reasonable observer. We have a Controller and Auditor General doing his job with his team as best he can. He has made no allegations. He has made a number of observations in relation to his, and I pointed on the last occasion, I asked, did you read the document? And I'm asking you again, did you read the 158 pages?
Yes.
Great.
But could I say in a quick response to that? I mean, you said there are no allegations. What comes across is that in 2014 we made a foolish commercial decision.
Mr. Soff, I'm going to. You've had ample time. In fact, we've done an unusual thing as a Public Accounts Committee, and not alone have we invited in the chairperson and the chief executive officer, but we're given each member. Now that's most unusual in my opinion, and I made that decision with the chair and the other members. It's most unusual because the board made the decisions and the board speaks as one voice. So we're giving you additional time. And you've taken 10 pages, and in my opinion, you've used 10 pages to be pejorative, to be overly defensive, and not deal with the issues. So let me take the easiest part, the conflict of interest.
Deputy, can I just come in, and I won't take this time. I want to concur. Essentially, and I want to support the Deputy in what the Deputy said, on this issue. We raised it with the chairman when he was here about the whole tone of NAMA's response to the report by the CNAG. Your essential argument is he changed the word potential to probable, and you are a little bit miffed that you didn't have a veto over his final draft. It's his report, not your report. And what I have to say, I want to put on the record, I was shocked, and I agree with the Deputy, I was shocked by your statement here today. You, in your opening statement, made 10 specific attacks on the Controller and Auditor General today, including, and these are your words, you accused him of no recognition of the commercial reality. You stated he made mistaken assumptions. You stated the CNAG ignored market advice. You stated the CNAG was simply wrong. You stated that the word probable was incongruous. You stated the CNAG made unsubstantiated suggestions. You said the CNAG failed to take account of certain items, and you said the CNAG expressed subjective opinion. All I'm saying is, if the NAMA story is such a good story, why have you come in to make 10 specific attacks on the person who wrote the report? How about playing your own game instead of attacking the person you're here again? I've never seen 10 attacks by any public body against another. You should have stated your point of view. You didn't need to make 10 separate attacks in addition to the myriad of attacks. You've made our job more difficult. That's actually why you're here today, to some extent. The level of attack on the CNAG has been unprecedented. We're not saying he was right or wrong, but what we do know is the level of attack. And does NAMA normally launch things like this to people who criticise them? 10 specific. And every word I mentioned are your words here this morning.
I think it is right that we should defend our position. And, and that's what we are doing. Why should we meekly accept what is very strong criticism of us when we feel that we are perfectly justified in defending our position? I think there was reference at a previous session here of a disagreement between the Office of Public Works in the past and the CNAG, and you yourself as a member of this committee said you liked people to stand their ground if they felt they were right, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, all I prefer is if a state body would play the ball and not the man. That's all I'm saying. That's the only point I'm making. Maybe you think playing the man is the best way of winning the game. I'm chairman here. If I was a referee, every NAMA person would have received a red card that has appeared before us. But I'm a chairman, so I'm listening to the end of the process. So sorry about that interjection, but Deputy Con, you get it.
Maybe a black card, Chair.
Yeah, maybe a black card.
That's extra time you've given me, Chair, is it? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah. So just in relation to the conflict of interest, and let's deal with the issues. So the allegations of Mr Cushnan's involvement in an arrangement to share fees with Brown Rudnick and Tuhans warranted more action by NAMA when the matter came to light. That's a statement from the Controller, warranted more action. Such as seeking advice from the unit within the National Treasury Management Agency that was responsible and so on, or writing to Mr Cushnan to seek confirmation or an explanation. Now, can you deal with that, please?
Well,
any of the three of you.
That statement is based on information that was available in 2016. We were dealing with what we knew in March 2014. And at that stage, Mr Cushnan had left us. PIMCO were gone. And there was little point in writing we felt at that stage to Mr Cushnan about something that was on a buyer's side with a company that was no longer in the process. Now,
no, Mr Stoff, no, I accept that. You're giving the exact same answer as Mr Daly. And today you're standing by that again. Yeah. Now, so the Controller and Auditor General gently, in my opinion, said you should have done more. And here you are today saying no. Okay. I'm not going to waste any more time on it. You're saying no. In my opinion, that's wrong. At the very least, you should have followed up on it. And at the very least, with hindsight, at this point, knowing what you know, it's extraordinary that you're not saying, So that's number one. Number two, in relation to the bidding process, which I don't come from that background, but I've certainly read a lot at this point, and I'm actually tiring of listening to 9 bidders. There were no 9 bidders. Let's put this one away. I tried to put it away the last day, and you're using up valuable time coming in here talking about 9 bidders. There were 3 bidders. Is that correct? Good. That's great. 3 bidders. Only 1 were interested. Only 1. Isn't that correct at that point?
Well, just for complete clarity,
Yeah.
5 signed statements or declarations of confidentiality, 5, and entered the data room. Yes. 3 made bids.
Listen, I have no difficulty with any of that. We're talking about a process here, and the Controller and Auditor General has identified issues or concerns in relation to the process. That's it. Nothing else. And, well, it would have been great if you came back and dealt with those issues, rather than going to the papers and rather than doing a 10-page opening statement with pejorative comments. So now, you repeat today there are 9 bidders. There are not. The process starts with 3 bidders. Only 1 bidder is interested, and you're forced to look at 3 more. And I've outlined all of this. So that is the process. You accept that. There were never 9 bidders.
I think it's fair to say now there were 9 bidders. We said that 9 companies were invited to bid.
9 companies were never invited to bid. Initially, 3 bidders. Okay, so when you come in here and you talk about 9 bidders, there's a duty on you, if you're standing over the process that the Controller and Auditor General has concerns about, there's a duty on you to come back and say, this is the process. You didn't. You come in today, Mr. Ellingham, and you referred to 9 bidders, once again, as did the NAMA witnesses.
9 were invited to bid.
No,
9 were invited to bid. They didn't bid. 9 didn't bid.
You can keep repeating that, and I'm highlighting what I've read, the process, and the Controller and Auditor General had concerns. You have not reassured me about those concerns. Okay, let me deal with 1 or 2 other little matters. In relation to disclosure, Mr. Cushnan, I understand from Mr. Roundtree last week, never left the room in any of the meetings that he attended. Is that right?
Well, that's, I mean, I can't recollect them all, but that could be true because he wasn't conflicted in relation to any of the items on the agenda.
Okay, so that's your explanation.
Yeah.
I understand that. So he represented 7 of the major debtors, 6 plus in partnership with somebody else in relation to the 7th, that represented 50% of the property or asset portfolio or the loan portfolio. Isn't that right?
But none of their business was discussed at NIAC meetings.
Yes, you've said that. Mr. Roundtree now has a slightly different view in relation to... No, actually, he backs you up on that, to be precise, but in relation to another matter, and Ulster, which I'll come back to. But this, Mr. Cushnan had 50%. He was representing 50% of the loan debtors. Isn't that right?
Well,
and never once was there a conflict of interest.
Yeah, because as I've said, and as the Chairman has said, and the Chief Executive so many times, the business, none of the business of any of those people was discussed at the NIAC meeting. No individual debtor's business was ever allowed to be discussed.
You've made that point clearly, and you've stuck to that. In relation to the Ulster research, and Mr. Roundtree was very clear about that it was a high-level piece of research, and you've confirmed that today. And there were many presentations, and he said that was potentially confidential information that somebody could make use of. I think, to summarise him, that's what he said. You probably listened carefully to his evidence, so you know better than I did. So are you disagreeing with him on that?
Well, let me explain. I mean, the information in relation to planning zoning is available in planning offices all over the country.
I understand that. I've been 17 years in local authority. I heard you say that. Yeah. I'm asking you a question.
But what this was doing
my question is, are you disagreeing with Mr. Roundtree? That's simply my question.
I am. I mean, I don't say that there's nothing, that there was
okay.
anything particularly confidential about it that was of benefit. The same information could be found by anyone who wanted to inquire whether development was possible at particular locations.
That's okay. In relation to Lazard, and Lazard was appointed in January 14, and Lazard were given a verbal briefing in relation to the sales process. Isn't that right? There was no written document. It was a verbal briefing. And there were... Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
good.
And they were to come back with their proposal in terms of...
You didn't give them a written document. You gave them a verbal briefing. Yes. Okay. And then the Controller and Auditor General has raised concerns in relation to what you relied on, the assurance from Lazard. And today you've relied on that again, and Mr. Soff in particular, you've come back and you've said that Lazard reassured you that the process was...
There was competitive tension to the very end.
Okay. Now, you never told Lazard that PIMCO had withdrawn in the circumstances that they had withdrawn?
It was not relevant for them. They were gone out of the process. And there was no reason to discuss it with them. PIMCO wanted to go away quietly, and they were allowed to do that.
Well, they certainly didn't go away quietly now, because we're talking about it now in 2016. So let's deal with this for a moment now. You're relying on Lazard's assurance. The Controller and Auditor General said that that's a limited assurance given the information available to Lazard. That's what the Controller and Auditor General is saying. Have you a difficulty with that?
Well, sorry for repeating myself, but they gave us an absolute assurance that there was potential tension to the end, competitive tension right to the very end, and that we were achieving more than our minimum price.
You're not listening to my question, sorry now. The Controller and Auditor General has raised an issue in relation to the nature of the assurance given by Lazard. And he says that Lazard had only limited information. So he raises a concern about that assurance. Do you accept that concern?
I think if we were to phrase that, we were happy that the assurance we had from Lazard's for a commercial transaction was adequate.
Well,
as a board, we were faced with, we're selling some assets, and I'm sure any party would be able to find reasons why an advisor needed to be given lots more information to give us an opinion. All we were asking for was an opinion from Lazard as to whether we were selling in a competitive process and getting a fair price.
How could you possibly rely on an assurance where you've given limited information, where you know that PIMCO have withdrawn? Sorry now, and then you come back and even today tell us that you're reassured by that assurance?
But all we were trying to do was to sell some assets for a particular sum of money in order to pay down debt. And therefore, we had an assurance that provided we got over 1.3 million, then that was the right price in the marketplace. And the buyer was capable of buying it. We were not, for us, it was a commercial transaction. And for Lazard's to opine on the maths of the situation, that's not, we didn't think it was irrelevant for them to be told why PIMCO had withdrawn.
Well, certainly to me, and I'm no expert, and I'd say to the ordinary person watching or listening, I'm not reassured. You give limited information to get the answer that you want. You give limited information to get precisely the answer you want, which is reassurance that the competition is competitive when there's only one, there's only one remaining bidder.
Well, there were two to the end, and as we have said, that is not uncommon. Even if you look at processes or a project like Project Eagle, there were two at the very end. That's quite normal. You get down to two.
It could well be, but this is not a normal process. This is not a normal situation. You're now aware that there were success fees. You're fully aware of all that, and you still don't pass that information on to Lazard.
That was dealt with and out of the way. It had nothing to do with the remaining process.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Saw.
Can I just say, Chairman, I think, and I hope this is useful to the Deputy, what was critically important was that NAMA did not allow somebody to come in and to determine what was the price. Before we had engagement around taking this sales price for this sales process further, we set, based on the analysis, as we have said, of all the cash flows that we would have out, looking at the impairment for 2013, looking at the valuation, discounting them back, and that's what we determined was the price that we believe we needed to achieve, and that was 1.3 billion. And I think that is the starting point from NAMA's perspective, not whether somebody was willing to pay 1.1 or 1.
You've said that, Mr. McHenry, and the clock is running against me, and I'm going to finish on two matters. PIMCO had already set the price in a range of 1.1 to 1.3. Just let me finish, because you've had your time. PIMCO had already set the price, and magically year price is very similar. The Controller and Auditor General said you had no evaluation, no valuation done. None of you have dealt with that. Just let me finish. You didn't deal with it in your 10 pages. You didn't deal with the fact that there was a strategic change of plan, okay? And all the Controller and Auditor General is saying is he didn't see it laid out in the documents that he looked at, the justification for that change of plan. And indeed, you've attempted to conflate and confuse. And I'm going to read what the Controller and Auditor General said. NAMA has outlined the strategic and commercial rationale underpinning the decision to sell the loan portfolio. This report draws no conclusion about the merits of that decision. Page 11 he doesn't comment on that whatsoever. He comments on the process and his concerns in relation to the process. So, strategitic change of plan.
Sure.
And
can I actually address the strategic?
Great.
Which is, firstly, we were, as a board, we were planning to continue to work out the assets on a piecemeal basis. We were approached. However, I think it's important to set the context of it. In the Section 227 report up to 2012, it was stated, the availability of this capital, the low-rate environment and the positive investor disposition toward Ireland creates an opportunity for NAMA to capitalise on this interest. In addition, the IBRC process provided successful acquirers with the critical mass to establish and invest in local servicing platforms, increasing their capacity and appetite for further acquisitions. That Section 227 report goes on and says, as long as these market conditions do persist, there is an opportunity for NAMA to sell portfolios into this demand more quickly than would have been predicted as recently as mid-2013. Now, what clearly, Deputy, the Department's own Section 227 report is saying, and quite frankly was on foot of some of the work being done around IBRC, is that a market was emerging for larger portfolio purchases rather than working out the assets, asset by asset, folio by folio. That is true, and that is what the Section 227 report is saying.
To deal with what the Controller and Auditor General raised, you have simply not dealt with a single... No, you're going on to quote, our time is limited, you're going on to quote from a 227 report. He simply said there was a strategic change of plan and there's no evidence in the contemporaneous papers that he looked at to justify that change of plan. That's all he said. Sorry, no, you've had 5 drafts. 5 drafts went back and forth. You've had months and you've had press releases. And you're quoting from a 227 today and not dealing with the simple issues of process.
Sorry, I do want to try and explain to the Deputy that up until, so in 2012, there were not, there was nobody interested in this portfolio. 2013, it emerged that there was somebody. And it would have been wrong of us, I believe it would have been wrong of us not to engage when there was interest in relation to the bulk acquisition of the portfolio.
Still not dealing with it.
And quite frankly...
We were changing strategy anyway.
And we were beginning to start to look at loan sales.
Because we had to pay down the debt more quickly.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. That's why you sold it off.
And the
Minister,
opportunity
you
was
confirmed that in a letter to the Minister, where you said the government were under pressure in relation to the senior bond debt, and this had to be sold. Exactly. Thank you, Mr.
We had to pay down the debt more quickly, and we had the opportunity. And if you look at the figures, as I quoted earlier, up to the end of 2013, we had paid down €0.75 billion of the debt. And in the 1 year, 2014, we paid down €9.1 billion. And since we've paid down a further 20 billion. And it is important to make the point that at this stage, we have paid down 26.6 billion of the debt, and there's 3.6 billion left. A very healthy position to be in when we see what the markets are like out there now, and Brexit is looming.
I understand that. Mr. Deputy Kelly.
Thank you, Chair.
What I'm suggesting is when Deputy Kelly concludes in a few minutes' time,
a few minutes, half an hour.
Well, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. We might take a quick break for 15 minutes if somebody wants a cup of tea or something, just for 15 minutes, because there are a couple of other speakers and we can't stay going. People need a bit of a break at the end of Deputy Kelly's.
He always does this after me for some reason. I think I have 6 questions and 2 observations. The first observation is comment with my colleagues. Look, I know you have a job to do, and thank you for coming in here, but this, individually for the 3 of you, this has been a PR disaster. Let me just say that. To sign off collectively, the 3 of you, on a statement like this, with the inferences that are in there, is a PR disaster for yourselves. NAMA, the PR, public relations management of NAMA, hasn't always been the best, but this is another example of it. I just want to concur with my colleagues. Some of the inferences in there, for me, are simply unacceptable versus the CNAG, in a manner in which he and his colleagues are just doing their job. They're not actually declaring any wrongdoing in relation to anyone. They're just doing a report, which is their role. And to make comments like that, I think, was unacceptable, and I think you should all reflect on it. Sorry, I said it was a statement, not a question. This is the Public Accounts Committee. Okay, we ask the questions. So that's my first statement, and there will be another one at the end. So my first question relates to page 2 of your soliloquy, or whatever we'll call it. You say that selling in more than one lot would, in our view, have delivered an inferior commercial outcome. The portfolio had a lot of secondary assets, and we simply could not have achieved an acceptable price if those assets had not been bundled with better quality assets. How do you actually know this? I mean, Lazard didn't do any analysis in relation to the value of the assets beforehand. That's a big, big statement.
Within the portfolio, there were assets which, based on the views that we were getting from asset recovery and the team, that were this, what we would call a very long tail of small, very impaired, very difficult assets. So that was internal information which was provided to the board by the executive team within NAMA.
Okay, but did you not think when you brought in a company to do the work that an underlying analysis of the assets would have been the right thing to do?
We had a lot of in-house experience in AHR. And they were seeing prices of assets every day of the week, and they were in a good position to judge value. 55 of the main assets constituted the bulk of the portfolio, and then you had this tail, as my colleague, Mr. Ellingham has said. It made sense to bulk, because it was likely to have the effect of getting the best price possible.
So you didn't think it would have been the right thing to do to get the organisation you had brought in to actually do an assessment of the assets?
Well, as I said, we had
because
the competence in-house.
You had the competency in-house, so you didn't. You didn't need a second opinion.
Could I? Deputy, there's a few things around that. Firstly, about 50% by value had been recently valued in the context of the year-end position for December 2013. where it wasn't NAMA who was putting a valuation on them. So half of the portfolio by value had recent valuations. That's the first thing. Second thing is, in respect of your point around the bundling, 19% of the portfolio was non-income generating. In actual fact, there was a cost associated with the holding of the assets. So, for instance, land or development or partially developed housing estates, or what. So they were non-income generating. And one of the key considerations for the board was that we wouldn't be left with that 19% as a rump. And that's why we did look at the bundling, and that would be a common practice when you'd be taking a loan sale.
I have no issue with your second part of the analysis. Let me just say this, from our perspective, and I think from most of us here, the fact that this wasn't done, I think was a weakness, and it should have been done. I think relying just solely on in-house analysis, you always need a second opinion. I'll get back to that because I've limited time. I laugh because I said this to the chair. There's a number of references inside in your statement in relation to Brexit. Remind me when Cheltenham is on next time around to bring the whole lot of the board of NAMA with me, because you seem to have a capacity to predict future outcomes. Like the references to Brexit, by and large, obviously was an issue in the sense that the Prime Minister had referenced the fact that this was coming ahead. But the idea that Brexit formed part of the equation of analysis in relation to pricing, I mean, that's
it was there in the background right from the time that Mr. Cameron announced that there was a vote, and it was a distinct possibility and something that we should bear in mind. This referendum was a lot different from Hal Wilson's referendum in '75, because
I was only born then, but
no significant media outlet was recommending leave at that stage. But if you look at what was happening this time, and forget about what the financiers...
I understand what you're saying, but can I just reference this though? If that's the case, and that's, that's your argument, something that I think... What weighting was put on that in relation to this analysis?
The weighting was that...
so as part of the equation decision-making...
with other things was that... what was happening in London and what was happening in parts of England and what was happening was generally was that there had to be a downturn sometime. I was in the public service for 45 years, and in every decade there have been peaks and valleys. Every one of them. What we were saying.
I've limited time. Can you answer my question, please?
What we were saying was that the clouds were gathering, and as part of our general policy, we should take any opportunity that we had to pay down the debt.
I think Deputy, it's fair to say it was on our risk register. I actually personally put very little weight on that. It's been truthful.
What about your two colleagues?
Well, I placed a fair amount of weight on it, because I thought that there was an over-optimistic view being taken of a vote to remain.
I would say it was a neutral factor. It was there. It wasn't the overriding factor in wanting to take the decision to exit the assets.
Okay.
What was much more important.
So we have Mr. McHenry saying it was negative. We have Mr. Soft saying that it was a significant, or was more of an issue, and Mr. Ellingham saying that it was neutral. So effectively, that's a plus, minus, and a neutral, which makes it a neutral, which means that it had no impact.
On the risk register. It was put on the risk for you. I think. But
the weighting put in subsequently post in your few words here, and by the way, is referenced by your chair, is much higher.
Well, what we're saying, essentially.
I think I've proved my point. I'll move on. I have a limited amount of time. Lazards are constantly being referred to in relation to here. Let me just say this personally: I would never hire him. From what I've seen here, the idea, for me, this is a box-ticking exercise. Their role, for me, is very bizarre, and I've referenced this before. You say in your words that on page 6 that I and other board members are satisfied based on Lazard's unequivocal expert advice. But sure, it's very easy to get the expert advice if you just define the role in such a limited way that they have to give you the answers that you kind of want. I mean, the idea that that they weren't required to do the value of the loan book earlier on, that the marketing exercise was pretty limited, as has been outlined by my colleague, which I won't go into now because I haven't time, and the fact that in relation to their post-analysis of the actual sales process, that they weren't informed of the fact that there was payments being made. I mean, does that not just say that their whole role inside in this was just box ticking?
No. And we said that from the start. They were asked to carry out a sales process, which they did in a professional manner, and they're an internationally renowned company.
I know who they are. Oh, trust me, I know who they are. I knew who they were before this. Anyway, we'll agree to disagree.
Can I just say, and I think it is important to say that the way Lazards were retained to on the basis that the board of NAMA had analysed the portfolio and said that its minimum price was 1.3 billion. In actual fact, the way that the engagement with Lazard was structured was that it was the pricing mechanism around how they got paid was going to be higher if they went to a party other than PIMCO. And I think that's an important thing. So their fee arrangement was less if PIMCO was the acquiring party.
I need to move on. In relation to, is there anything here in relation to this whole process that you believe would be you should have improved on, or you would have done differently or better?
Well, I don't think so. I think that this was
a
good, sound process.
And Evie, the other two gentlemen? Okay, well, the chair of your board said that he would have done one thing differently, is documentation. Okay? Do you agree with that?
I'd like to make a few comments around that, because the chairman made in his statement last week, or on the 29th, when I was here, said that the important thing around documentation and minutes is that they record the decisions and not the discussions. And in the well-known publication, which is the company secretary, it says record of decisions and resolutions passed, not discussions, and that's referenced by the Director of Corporate Enforcement. That is the basis upon which NAMA has kept its records since.
Fine. I actually don't have any issue with your last statement, but it is fair to say that records and documentation could have been kept better. Well, that's your own chair who said that.
Well, I mean, in truth, I believe. Can I just say, I do believe that CNAG has in this report has stated that he has had an issue around the record keeping, minute keeping, but I genuinely believe that you'll have some people who'll say they should be descriptive. They're descriptive in this committee for sure, but in others not.
Okay, but let's get down into the nitty-gritty of what I'm getting at here. It's not just about minutes. I mean, throughout this process, we've looked for documentation in relation to the analysis as regards the discount. And we've been told on a couple of occasions that we will get that. So, Chair, we still haven't got it. We asked again here today. So if there's such good documentation, let's set a time limit on it. Let's say you can give it, because we've been looking for it for some time now, 3 weeks. So today is Monday. Can we have it by, or today is Tuesday, can we have it by Thursday? Because the documentation, if there's no problem with the documentation, we should have it by now. Not minutes. But you said repeatedly, you're sure, and you used the word sure. You used the word sure, that there was various iterations that would have made references to confirm your hypothesis. Well, if there is, produce it, and produce it immediately.
Sorry, Deputy, I think it is incumbent upon us to go back and say when did the iterations go, because when accounts are published...
3 weeks.
Well, sorry, and for sure, when accounts are published, it isn't on that day that they're prepared. They're prepared for quite a period of time, and we will. And I will go back to NAMA, and I will ask that information is given.
This week would be good.
Yeah, I think it's fine to make a point.
I have a number of other questions.
Deputy, can I say that in relation to providing documentation in relation to Lazard, that is correspondence with the committee about that and the confidential.
Well, we'll find out.
Confidentiality issues
we'll find out about the other documentation this week.
Finish. I didn't hear that. You're saying they're confidential.
I mean, we have sought their permission to release certain documentation, and we are. I understand they have. Or we, on their behalf, have been in touch with you to ascertain can confidential documentation be provided in a limited way.
We wait to hear from them because
we actually don't really know what you're talking about there, so we'll find out soon, hopefully. In relation to the payments fees, the success fees, obviously you became aware of this. PIMCO pulled out or were forced out. We still haven't got to the bottom of what happened there. But what I don't understand is you got an assurance from PIMCO, you got an assurance from Cerberus afterwards that there would be no payments made to anyone associated with NAMA. Isn't that correct?
Past or present.
Past or present, fine. But this issue I've raised before. What about the step-down process? That a payment could be made to somebody who was involved with NAMA through one of those who was getting a payment from Cerberus. In other words, did you ensure categorically that those who were you were doing business with, if there was payments being made and success payments being made, that they couldn't make payments to anyone who was associated with NAMA?
The assurance they gave us was that...
No, I didn't ask you what the assurance they gave you. I asked you, did you ensure that third parties who were getting success payments could not make further payments to anyone associated with NAMA?
Well,
yes or no?
The insurance covered... Cerberus, our contract was with Cerberus. They assured us that people that they were engaging also would not be making payments to people associated with NAMA.
Okay, fine. Well, may I make an observation based on your answer? Is this? The answer is no. Obviously, it's true if the answer was yes, because if you had asked, which I'm now taking you didn't, for a guarantee from Cerberus that they wouldn't be making any success payments to any third parties who in turn would make payments to anyone associated with NAMA, well then this process couldn't have gone through, but we didn't, you didn't get that.
Well, as I said, they assured us that they weren't making payments to anybody associated with NAMA or anybody that they were engaging to work for them weren't making payments to anybody associated with NAMA.
But now it looks like that's not true. Is it? We don't know. We'll find out in the wash. Anyway, last question, which is, you make reference on page 6, and this is something that I think is probably honest and, it's all reflective. On the sales process itself, we believe the CNAG also failed to take account of the wider political engagement NAMA's decision to sell the Eagle portfolio and the obligations on NAMA as a state agency in Dublin to be cognizant of the concerns of the Northern Ireland Executive and of the Irish Government. And this tallies, in fairness to, in summary, the summary number 10 of what the CNAG, the factors that influence this decision, emergence of the in the political and cross-jurisdictional context in which it held the Northern Ireland debtors' assets, and its assessment that its relationship with the Northern Ireland debtors was deteriorating, and also the widespread lack of cooperation. So, is it fair to say that? Obviously, you've got Section 10 of the NAMA Act, which you have to observe on one side, and on the other side, you've got political pressure. Let's be frank about it. And remember, politicians in Northern Ireland were not under the same limitations as all of us down here in the south as regards interacting with NAMA. Diplomacy issues, obviously, that's high up there. Lack of debtor engagement, or debtors not engaging. And 4, business risk. And you could probably legitimately throw in Brexit into that, but other business risks. So you've got those on this side, and you've got Section 10 of the NAMA Act on the other side. So there was a weighting going on. And is it fair to say that taking those 4 points, that really once the option, and remember this was a volte-face, going from a fire sale to then literally a one bulk sale. Once that option came, given the 4 other issues which I've just referenced, that you basically couldn't look a gift horse in the mouth, and the idea of selling in one bulk sale for this amount was just worthwhile, even with the competition of Section 10 of the NAM Act as regards getting best value and these 4 things. When you weighed it up, that this was the best option, would that not be fair?
Can we did, obviously we had to weigh up, and the paramount focus of the board was Section 10, but paramount. Not exclusive. Paramount. But I think in truth, the other thing, Deputy, which we were going through at the time when the PIMCO expression of interest was manifest, was we were just doing our year-end impairment in respect to the portfolio in Northern Ireland, and in 2013 we put through an impairment onto the portfolio, and the minutes at the latter end of 2013 indicate that we expected a further deterioration in 2014 of that portfolio. Clearly, we believed that we were going to have a further impairment on the value of the Northern Ireland portfolio beyond the date of that year end, 31st December. Okay. So that was very central to our decision making.
Okay. When I deal though with the political element, I think, which you want an answer.
By all means do. We're all politicians in here, Barry.
Nobody brought political pressure on us to sell. What we did have regard to was what was said to us, that there should be a discreet and confidential process. Okay. And that's why there was a short, focused process.
Was there a clean break? Was obviously discussed at board level. It had to be. Yes. A clean break was discussed. Thanks for confirming that. Did you have any concerns in relation to the meeting that took place in early 2013 between the First Minister Peter Robinson and Mr. Coulter and Frank Cutchinaghan at Stormont?
In what way?
In any way. I'm asking the question.
Well, no, as
I mean,
Minister Nolan has confirmed.
Think about this. There's been a volte-face here as regards the decision making at board level in relation to a fire sale and now a sale all in one go. There's been a meeting that took place in Stormont. There is a person who's on the NAAC at it. There is a letter from Brown Rudnick to Finance Minister Wilson, which is effectively a letter of intent, which, if you look at it in any other way, is something that is basically saying that a purchaser will almost be nicer to debtors, and particularly in relation to personal guarantees. There's a meeting taken on up in Stormont. Did all of this not create some concern at board level in NAMA?
The main motivation for us in selling was we saw the opportunity as a result of PIMCO coming on the scene, and there seemed then to be the opportunity to have a loan sale. We were moving into that territory anyway because it would speed up.
It is fair to say
speed up the pay down of the debt.
It is fair to say, though, that you wouldn't have sold only for the approach coming in and the way in which it came.
Well, that brought it forward at that stage.
Then there was the letter to Mr. Wilson. There was the meetings taking place in Stormont. Obviously, the letter of intent gave certain guarantees or reference certain guarantees. Whether they could materialise or not is another question. And next thing, there was this approach.
Well, once the approach came, we said, is there a commercial opportunity here for us, and is there an opportunity to sell?
The four factors I've just outlined. The 4 factors I've just outlined, and I've also just outlined the letter of intent, the meetings that were taking place, the role of Mr. Cutchinaghan, etc., etc. Like, that somewhere inside in the board, did you not consider that all of these activities, and given that the change of thinking as regards a fire sale and the 4 pressures that you were under. And Mr. McHenry has said it was Section 10 was not exclusive, which is a very important statement. It was not paramount, paramount but not exclusive, which is very interesting, which we'll have to come back to. Did it not concern you that there was possibly and I'm referring to Mr. McHenry's use of a word earlier on in a different context, but that there was almost a proxy sale going on here, in the sense of it was set up to address those 4 things that I keep referencing: business risk, lack of debtor engagement, diplomacy, and political pressure, particularly the latter. I'm just concluding. I'm just concluding.
Our main consideration was there opportunity there to get a fair market-related?
Okay, fine, but my final reference, and this is it, is that at your board meeting on the 12th of December, it made reference to the portfolio sale would release NAMA from, and I quote, what had been a disproportionate burden of effort in light of the relative size of the portfolio.
Taking up a lot of time, yes.
So, what had been a disproportionate burden of effort. What does burden of effort mean?
Well, dealing with the debtors, there was a resistance to assign rents to us. There was a resistance to sell. People.
Is it the 4 things I made reference to, really? Is it lack of debtor engagement?
Yes.
Business risk?
Yes.
Diplomacy and political pressure?
I think it's the first one, in the sense that the asset recovery team were managing assets in Northern Ireland, in Ireland, and in the UK and some other places in Europe. The problems they had with debtor engagement in Northern Ireland was by far the highest in any part of the portfolio.
But, can I emphasise, no political pressure from government here or anywhere else influenced our decision.
And concluding now, Chair, I'm not asking another question. Just for me, I believe that, coming down to the crux of this, it is that pendulum which I spoke about earlier on, in relation to the 170 million, is those four areas versus Section 10 of the NAM Act, and was it going to be worthwhile? And whether it was paramount or exclusive, as referred to by Mr. McHenry. I mean, that is the crux of this issue. Whether or not, the 170 million which the CNAG has made reference to, obviously, and which we're discussing here, whether that was worthwhile given the 4 issues that I've made reference to. That is not a question, it's a statement, so I'll refer on to my colleagues.
At this stage, what I'm going to suggest, did you have just one quick comment?
Yes, Chairman,
a
very, very quick comment. I would like, I've been chair of the audit committee for a number of years. I'd like to say that we have had much valuable interaction from the CNAG. In the first instance, I'd like to say this, and where we could enhance. Remember, we were set up effectively in 2010. We had to build a system from nothing. We got huge assistance from the CNAG and advice around that. And I'd like that to be acknowledged and to be noted. But can I just say one thing, Chairman, as I finish? I do think, in the context of the reference to a probable loss of 190 million pounds sterling, it is something that we're rightly accountable in front of this committee to give our view around whether or not. Now, can I just, on the 29th of September, CNAG, in response to Deputy Kelly, said, when Deputy Kelly asked, what's the margin around that figure? He said, it is impossible really to project it or to estimate it.
Absolutely.
And
I believe that's right.
And I think
it could be higher.
And in actual fact,
lower.
We believe, and that's, I think, so when you say probable of an amount, that's the issue, Chairman, that we have a particular, and I think, but I do want to acknowledge significant real value that the CNAG has made to NAMA during the process.
Maybe re-edit your statement.
Okay, I'm just concluding just for a moment, and that's an issue we as a committee will have to deal with. What I'm going to say, we're going to take just a 15-minute break, because we're here since 10 o'clock. And what I would say is to the 3 gentlemen, if you want to take a minute or two at the commencement of the next session, because questions were being fired at you and you might not have got an opportunity. If you're happy to proceed, we will, but if you just say there's 2 points we didn't get to cover, please give me a minute or two. You have the opportunity when you come back, in case there were some issues weren't properly had time to respond to. So 15 minutes suspension of the meeting. Thanks.